Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Gimme 5, the channel where we dive deep into the minds behind the books and capture our imagination. Today, I'm thrilled to host a guest whose work blends philosophy, psychological depth, and rich fantasy world building. Our featured author is Peter Gribble, a lifelong student of history and a passionate believer in the power of intellect and imagination. With a background in design, psychology, and education, and writing credits that range from cultural commentary to gardening columns, Peter brings a unique interdisciplinary lens to his storytelling. In his fantasy series, The City of Magicians, he introduces us to civilization that has rejected violence, opting instead for a psychological strategy, diplomacy, and telepathic communication. But in a world bracing for barbarian invasion, where power plays and secret societies threaten every fragile piece, even the most pacifist city must prepare for chaos. Today, we'll be talking about The Threat, which is the first installment of the City of Magicians trilogy, a gripping series that continues with Within and concludes with Quickening. In Threat, tactics meet telepathy as a librarian, a skeptical young emissary, and a city strategist are drawn into a web of betrayal, blackmail, and resistance. The stakes? Survival. Not just lives, but ideas, identity, and fragile peace their city was built on. Get ready for magical questions that open the spellbook behind the City of Magicians. Please welcome Peter Gribble to the show. Hey, Peter, how are you?
Hey, Elizabeth, how are you?
Doing great, thank you. So, where in the world are you?
I'm in the Vancouver area of British Columbia, Canada. And the weather is we had a thunderstorm earlier today, but the temperatures are slowly warming up. And of course, we're worried about the fire season, which has already started.
Fire season already, huh?
Yep.
Wow, amazing. Yeah. We're here in Slovakia. I've been traveling. So interestingly, in June with the spring, I'm still wearing a jacket. It's a little bit cold.
Yep. But every once in a while, so do I. I have to put a sweater on. Just like, my goodness, this morning it's chilly. But when the sun comes out, then it's shorts and T-shirts.
There you go. So if you don't like the weather, dress in layers. It's going to change.
Absolutely, yes.
Fantastic. Well, are you ready to get started?
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's talk first about the dangers of complacency. Peter, you've spoken about standing as a 9-year-old in a field of white crosses at the Normandy War Memorial. Growing up in post-war France with silence surrounding the war and German classmates beside you, how did those early unspoken experiences of conflict shape the City of Magicians?
Well, it was something when my father was transferred into NATO when I was 8. And so the nice thing about Europe, as you know, is you can hop in the car and travel through 5 countries if you have a mind to. But the first day of school, we were told there was a war, Germany lost, you do not talk about it. And it was, okay, fine. It was basically that diplomatic courtesy because you had German kids, French kids, British, Belgian, Dutch, all that sort of stuff. During the morning classes, we had to speak absolute French, not a single word of any other language. They were quite strict. And then in the afternoon, you separated to your various portables and took your own classes. And so the Germans went to the German portable, the Canadians, the Dutch. So it was interesting. But in the schoolyard, you could speak any language. The second year, the second summer, we went off to Normandy because I'm sure my parents, who had lived through the war, had lost friends and they were rather excited. And so we got there and I was stunned. I just thought, what is all these little white crosses, especially to the horizon, just flabbergasted me. And my mother was trying to exercise my math skills by saying, well, as we stood in front of various crosses, how old was this one when he died? And they were all in their late teens and early 20s. And the numbers always ended in 1940, 1941, 42, 43, whatever. And then she pointed to another cross. And how old was this one? And, Mummy, the numbers are wrong. The birth year was in the 1890s, and the death year was in the 1917, 1918. And I said, but then my mother clarified, saying, that's because he died in the First World War. And I thought, 2 world wars in the same place? I was rendered into silence. I couldn't speak. All this commemorated death was somehow deeply wrong. And we eventually drove off to the Gimme Ridge Memorial, which is this massive, grand thing. But I never saw it because I refused to get out of the car. It was a very interesting thing to know that somehow you are deeply, inarticulately right, that this was wrong. So my parents left and had a wonderful thing. I've only seen pictures of it, but I sat in the car with this mute sense of vindication that I could not articulate. And years would pass. I had no idea I would ever use this as a premise for a novel. But yeah, I thought The City of Magicians is a pacifist, nonviolent, egalitarian city that has no army, but they're going to have to figure out something because there's a barbarian invasion coming in 6 months.
Wow, that is amazing that at 9 years old, you had that epiphany, that connection, and that it affected you so deeply, and that it stayed with you all this time.
So when I came back to Canada, I studied Mahatma Gandhi and read the essays and speeches of Dr. Martin Luther King, who was very deeply influenced by Gandhi. But the curious thing about pacifism is that it doesn't always work, and there are critiques about it. And so this is one of the reasons why I wanted to explore this. Pacifism will not work with people like Hitler, Stalin, Mao Zedong, that sort of thing. They couldn't care less for noble sentiments. So how would something like that work? But in India, it worked brilliantly. For Mahatma Gandhi was able to get rid of England. But the situation was interesting. Even as early as in the 1700s, the Brits didn't really want to be there. And so they had this quaver of doubt and ambivalence about their presence there, even though vast wealth entered into England. And in the end, so one of the most important things in a stance, you have to have unity. And in the end, this is what eventually killed Mahatma Gandhi. He was trying to placate the various aspects. There was the Mughals, basically is Muslim citizens of India, and then there was the Hindu, and that was just only part of it. And he was trying to, let's get along, let's be one country. And Jinnah, who led the Muslim population, said no. And so Gandhi, trying to placate this idea of 2 countries, was assassinated by one of his own people because they thought he was caving in. So if you have a stance like pacifism, it must be unified in order. But even still, it was incredibly powerful, and the British left.
Wow. Why do you think that the pacifist society under siege makes for such a compelling story? All those elements that you just discussed in a world that rejects violence, can intellect and psychology, strategy truly stand up to brute force?
It can, if you can sort of weigh yourself into the barbarian mind, if you were. And this is what happens. This is what a telepathic sending is sort of like. Let's get close to the barbarian leader and see if he is susceptible to, an alternate point of view. And there are aspects. You do not need to rape, pillage, and burn down a city. That might be to your advantage to have it whole and complete and allow it to maintain its integrity. But the problem with City Magicians, there's an underground movement plotting to collaborate with the same barbarian. And how this Shoan, the strategist, get it to reveal itself so that he can get rid of it and present a face of unity. And yes, this violence is unacceptable. So that's the whole thing. Book 1, Threat, is the whole synopsis of let's prepare for the barbarian invasion. Let's expose this underground movement. And so poor old Shoan, the city strategist, is trying to control all these factors.
So what does the story reveal about the strengths and vulnerabilities of the civilizations that choose peace over power?
Again, that whole notion of unity, integrity is more important than capitulation. And but how do you maintain that when your city itself has been 3 centuries of peace and loveliness, and you are a pilgrimage site because you have a supposedly sacred spring, something like Lourdes. It occasionally heals people, and most of the time it just brings you peace and acceptance of your fate or your illness or your condition. And the city has grown quietly successful. That's not quite the right word. They just become more comfortable with the fact that, status quo is very nice. So the barbarian invasion is going to shake that up. And in order to shake it up, you have to reconfirm and rededicate yourself to your principles, to your supposed integrity. And can you?
Exactly. Very good question. One of those core tensions in your novel is danger of knowledge itself. So how do you see information functioning as a weapon in the City of Magicians?
By bringing it to light. And so that there is just, this is what we are. This is what is also what we are. We have to acknowledge the fact that there's a movement or an underground situation that does not quite agree with our original premises. And so it's like a self-education when you encompass the entire society, not just your somewhat isolated perspective. Bubble. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So who controls the knowledge in your book, and what risk arise when control is challenged or abused?
People have various aspects of knowledge. There are the traditions. So I have a college of augurs who try to predict things looking at natural phenomenon. And then there's the guild of the telepaths who know how to embrace and understand people and try to enhance them. And then there's the fifth school who says, we have other plans. We know all this sort of stuff as well. But we have an agenda that, no, we're not going to tell you what it is. We want certain things. So really? Why? And how do you dig up that why before the barbarian arrives? Is the trick that Sean has to do, or at least expose them and see that they are not compatible for the original premises of what Canada likes to call peace, order, and good government.
Wow. Yeah. Wow, that's fascinating. I love it. Hey, Peter, let's talk about the magic in Peter's world and our world. Okay?
Okay, yep, absolutely.
So magic in your world isn't about spells and dragons. It's about insight, awareness, and perception. How do you personally define magic, and how does that shape the world you've built?
Well, the magic is the same as ours. And the city acknowledges this. In a nice, quiet way, they basically say, you and I are equals, even though we know more. We practice more. Our insights are deeper, and they're passed on through generations, all this sort of stuff. But basically, what you experience, we experience. But we know why we experience them. So in these moments where, and the thing is, we go through this every day, but we don't always pay attention to it. Like if you decide to go down the street and just say, oh, I think I'll cross the road today and walk down this side of the street. And then you turn the corner, suddenly you meet someone. Oh, my goodness, I haven't seen you in 10 years. My God, hey, we have to get together for coffee, et cetera, et cetera. But you forget the fact that somewhere 15 minutes earlier, you decided to cross the street. Now, what prompted that? So retrace your breadcrumbs and realize there is something, I don't like to call it unconscious, because it was conscious enough to tell you to cross the street. Sufficiently conscious to motivate you to just say, let's cross the street. And our lives have far more incidences of this sort of awareness. I like to call it the sentience of reality itself.
Wow, I like that. And, I'm so fascinated with telepathy and clairvoyance and all the powers that we apparently do have, but we've blocked when we come to this earth plane, right? And it's just like we need to get older so we can unwind all of our mental programming to be able to tap into those abilities. Wouldn't that be fabulous?
Well, that's why city magician culture has put those blocks that we are familiar with. A, it doesn't exist. B, if it does, it's dangerous. And C, if it's dangerous, you've got to be really careful, whatever. So we do have all these blocks, but if we peek at our daily lives, those instances of telepathy, coincidence, accidents, there are no such things as accidents. If you pay attention, just say, oh, if I go down, if I go out and do my errands, maybe I should skip this other one. Who knows? You may have been. What are you with some precognition acknowledging the fact, oh, I shouldn't be doing this. I should be doing this instead. But some people, depends on what you want out of life. How do you attract these things? How do you set them up? One of the things I've been always fascinated with, and it's also partially included in City, is the hands. If you learn how to read the hands, I used to take handprints of some of the people I met because it's something I studied. And the lines on the hands will change. So they are not fixed. Yep.
Really? I didn't know that.
Absolutely. So I would have people come back 6 months to a year later, and I would point things out to them to say, oh, look at this, and take a look at lines on your thumbs and fingertips. And I've got lines on my thumbs that go across, and they generally indicate shilly-shallying, inability to make decisions, all that sort of stuff. But it's not an inability to make decisions. It's an unwillingness to make decisions.
That's quite a big difference. And I have lines on my thumbs too. I never noticed.
Okay, that indicates that you're sort of, oh, I want to do this. No, I don't. Well, maybe I can do it now. Oh, no. It's that sort of thinking. So that indicates basically you're sitting on the fence in a really interesting way. We had a premier who was famous for sitting on the fence. And he would waffle all over the place. And when he was questioned about this, he said, no, I'm not sitting on the fence. I am the fence.
Oh, snap. I like that.
Yeah. But the interesting thing is the lines will change. When I get my act in order and I get things aligned and everything, these lines begin to vanish within 3 days.
Really? So
Absolutely.
Does it matter if you have a line on your right thumb or your left thumb?
Yes. If you're right-handed, it would indicate if you have no lines on your left thumb, but you have one on
right thumb.
It would indicate that if you have a line on your right thumb and not on your left, it would indicate this is just a situation you've been in for the last 3 months. If it's on both thumbs, it indicates it's been there for at least 6 months, if not longer.
Wow!
So you may find,
you just did a thumb reading for me. Thank you very much. I feel so enlightened now.
Well, then each finger also has its own speciality. So if you had them on the index fingers, it indicates your self-criticism is completely unnecessary. It indicates you get up every morning, you say, oh, I was such a terrible person yesterday, and oh my goodness. But it indicates the analysis is over the top.
Wow.
But some people have lines that go across, which indicates the roadblocks you've assembled, and lines going up the fingertip, which indicates, I am a terrible person, but I can also do this. So yours are quite busy, right?
Yes. You know what? I think that is part of the everyday magic is what you've just demonstrated for us with the lines and the thumbs and the fingers. Yeah. So thank you for that. So
it's a revelation when you realize your self-analysis can start at the end, at your fingertips. Your self-analysis is there. You say, I've got to work on this. And, or let's just give this a rest and just say, These are the symptoms. But if you take a look at the inner reasons for them, and then you begin to explore and eradicate and reconfigure the inner dynamics, the cognitive dynamics, the hands will begin to clear.
Wow. Thank you for that, Peter. I always get frustrated when I hear people say, I'm just so bored. It's like, there's so much to learn. Look what we just learned. Thank you for that.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure.
Oh, so now I want to know, there's a huge influence of historical memoirs in your writing, and your world building draws from the late medieval and early Renaissance period. What role does history play in shaping the political and philosophical landscape of your fantasy world?
Oh, it's I love the saying that truth is stranger than fiction. So hey, why not go to nonfiction? So the books you see behind me, I'll point them out there. So those and the ones above. Let me just check
Wow.
Are these are fascinating resources that I use for the period that we're talking about, and also up to about the 18th century. These are the memoirs from the courts of Europe. And so if you take a look at this and you say, oh my goodness, wow, this is better than 1001 Nights. So you get these people's perspective. And so if you want to know what a court life is and the political machinations that are going on and all that sort of stuff, hey, no better resource than something like that.
Yeah, boy, you got that right. And I love your library. That's always been my fantasy, is to have this one of those great big libraries. You put the ladder and you roll it around, right, to get to the books. So what's the story about Duke in Louis the Eighth? Is it time that caught your attention?
It was Louis the 14th and Louis the 15th. He was the Duke of Saint-Simon, ST, like Saint Simon, and everybody knew he was writing, but they didn't know what he was writing. But what he was doing, he was writing a memoir of everything that was going on in court. And Louis XIV, so he was there for the death of Louis XIV and then the regency for Louis XV. And he was writing, and he was trying to scramble up the ladder and looting everything and listen to what everyone said and all this sort of stuff. And some of the things are quite alarming. And then when he finally published, people were scandalized. How dare he write about this, that, the other? But interesting revelations at one point. He, have I got my chainsaw on? There's so many Louis. At one point, I think it was the story of Louis the 13th. And his father, who had also been high in court, realized that Louis the 13th had this sort of little thing for this woman, and so he began to arrange it so that he and she to get together. And when Louis the 13th realized what was happening, he said, no, you cannot do this. I am married to Anne of Austria, and I must be faithful. Thank you, but don't ever do that again, or you will lose your place. So, wow. So the interesting, it wasn't a case of all the kings are just having affairs all over the place. But it was an interesting revelation that Louis XIII was reasonably faithful. But then he went on to write about, I think it was Louis XIV. I can't remember whether it was Louis XIV's court or Louis XV. And he was noticing this power couple. He was handsome and she was gorgeous, and they were married and they wore their sumptuous gowns. But something that he had found out, which absolutely just floored him, this beautiful couple, they had syphilis. And it was the AIDS of the day. It was basically a death sentence. And very few people knew about it. But so
many Louis, and who knew, right? I mean, they had these scandalous things going on, way before they had Netflix, so they had to go do something, right? Scandalous, right. Something exciting.
But Louis XIV did a very interesting thing. He basically tried to collect all the nobility, all the aristocrats, and sort of situate them in Versailles so we could keep an eye on them. And at that point, he was also the longest living monarch. At that point, his reign was 70 years. It was 70 plus years.
Does
because
that
he
match
came
the
to.
Queen of England?
No, I think Victoria was still the longest lived. I'm not sure whether Elizabeth and Victoria very similar length of reign. So yeah.
Wow, that's fascinating. History is just fascinating to me. So you
Yeah.
reference strategy often in your writing. How did things
Yeah.
like Napoleon's influence on Tolstoy or the historical battlefields tactics shape your approach to the conflict in the City of Magicians?
Well, one of the most fascinating memoirs wasn't really a memoir. It was written by Lecomte de Philippe Paul de Ségur, and that's Segur. He was an adjutant and I think Napoleon had 5 secretaries just because he was doing so much. And this guy basically followed Napoleon on his Russian campaign and wrote a very clear, cited, concise, yet detailed and immersive story about the Russian campaign, which was horrendous. Because the interesting thing about that he noted that Napoleon was observing, Napoleon complained as they were marching into Russia and they were losing men all over the place, that he could not see the chessboard. And the chessboard and the Tsar, who was basically had his various generals strategizing the entry of Napoleon's forces, which were massive. 400,000 men were entering into Russia, and but Napoleon completely had these skirmishes and some battles, but it was always inconclusive. And Napoleon said, "I can't see the chessboard. He's not sitting opposite the chessboard." But that didn't stop him. And he had been warned by several people that he had trusted not to invade Russia. And so basically, Ségur wrote about the eventual arrival into Russia. And Napoleon did not burn Russia, did not burn Moscow. It was the Russians themselves. It was a scorched earth philosophy that Napoleon really hadn't come across. And they were forced to retreat, and the Russians were trying to get him to retreat along the path he had come because there was nothing there to survive on. So
Wow.
reading something like that, it's and because it was so intimate, he saw the disasters that unfolded. So reading stuff like that as references sort of sharpens the perspective of the futility of war.
Right, and in throughout your series, though, the with threat, the chessboard concept is echoed. So how is that important in War and Life to understand the position on the chessboard?
I'm just using that as an analogy, basically. It's like Sas and Lalia, basically they're envoys of the two enclaves, the two factions of city. But they are, I like the comment that is on the back of book 1. Sas and Lalia are pawns in the strategies of others, yet it only takes a pawn to change the game. So it's an analogy. They have their own game. They have their own game called Spheres, which I had a lot of fun creating as well.
Fantastic. And I was thinking back to when we were talking about hands. Do you have your book Threat? I think it has a handprint on it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you show that to us?
Yep, that's a cute observation. Yep, because it's also because City of Magicians, they have the way they write. They use glyphs like Mayan glyphs, ancient Egyptian, Siamese caricatures, that sort of stuff. And so that is a number 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Written in the old way. So this is how they used to write the number 5. But it's also a clue that the 5th school still exists, which is this underground movement plotting. So there's someone just saying, listen, the city is in trouble. And that's the opening chapter. A pale blue 5 was drawn on a crier pillar. And what is this? It's a warning.
Wow. Very powerful. Very powerful opening.
Thank you.
So let's talk about those characters in the City of Magicians and Threat. So Layla is such a fascinating character, searching for a lost manuscript while navigating blackmail and betrayal. How does her personal quest reflect the larger themes of power, survival, and sacrifice in your book?
Well, she's an innocent. She fell in love with this lovely guy in the park, and they discuss philosophy and history, and he shows her. He's a bit shy about showing her a book he's working on, and she realizes, oh, he's exploring corruption in the city of magician in the city, and she's, oh, be really careful. And then a month later, he disappears, and she goes on a hunt for him and his lost manuscript, which she's only seen a chapter. And bit by bit, her sleuthing entraps her in the underground movement, and she's facing the choice between life or death. And she says, okay, life, okay, I will obey all the instructions from you. And but only bit by bit, she realizes, oh my goodness, I'm in this horrific trap. And how do I maintain my integrity? And yet there's no way I can escape. But how can I maintain my integrity secretly? And she barely does. And then she's wondering, this is getting to be too much. So each book ends with a cliffhanger, and she's got she's part of that linchpin of that cliffhanger at the end of Threat.
So we meet our same characters again in Within, the next
absolutely.
book.
And it deepens. Oh, yes, absolutely. They are pivotal. The interesting thing about the trilogy, I was writing it as a single book. And my poor publisher, when it was completed, she said, oh, my goodness, this is far too big. Can you cut it down? Can you make a division? And amazingly, I saw, oh, there, and there. My goodness. I like to call it literary mitosis, or cellular division. And the thing just went, book 1, book 2, book 3. It was perfect. And I was quite surprised at how this goes back to the whole notion of, you know what you're doing in some interesting fashion, that the writer's part of me said, okay, book 1, book 2, book 3, but we won't tell him it's not one book just yet. So it was amazing how it naturally underwent this division. So,
wow.
So all the characters keep going. But the last chapter in Quickening surprised me as well. That I had an ending for it prepared, and I started going through it, and I thought, oh, this is pretty quiet. This is pretty tame. And then my little writing voice said, okay, now that you've got this out of your system, write this. And I was blown away. And it opened the portal for books 4, 5, and 6. Which is
there's a 4, 5, and 6?
Yep.
Oh, yep, my gosh.
Second trilogy.
Oh my gosh, you are amazing. So now that we've mentioned Within and Quickening, do you have the books to flash?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So you're seeing book 1.
Mm-hmm. That's
Threat. This is book 2, which won a gold medal at the Book Fest this year at the LA Times Festival of Books Book Fest. And
fantastic. Congratulations.
Thank you. This is book 3, Quickening.
Very nice covers. On book 2, Within, where is that scene?
Well, it's a picture. My publisher said, check on Adobe Photo and see if there's anything that you like that would be appropriate. And so I saw this picture. I thought, oh my goodness, this is brilliant. It talks about, in book 2, the barbarian arrives. So this is, all the things that happened. And the fights between the counts and the strategist. The strategist council, the Fifth School, and Purdu, the barbarian leader. He knows there are 2 factions. One is going after his heart. One is going after his ambitions. So yeah. So he throws Sasha and I'm giving too much away. Sasha and Lydia together, and says, "But this is what I want." So I just thought Within was perfect. You get this whole sense of entering this city environment and just say, where does that path lead to? And Oh,
Yeah, it's
all
very
right.
intriguing. It looks very European.
Yeah, I think I think it's a small little town. I think it was in Italy, but it may have been it's certainly I think it's a small little town in somewhere in Italy.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing those. And
Hmm.
my favorite character, I love her abilities. Gluisa, am I saying that correctly?
Oh, Gillespia.
Glesvia.
Gillespia. Yeah.
She's the astronomer, and she measures the sky with her only using her hands, no telescope.
Yeah.
She
Yes.
represents knowledge gained through focus and limitation.
Yep.
So, what inspired this character, and how does she contribute to the novel's deeper themes?
Oh, it's massive. It's far more. She was always there before I put pen to paper. Sass was there. Lalia was very strange. She was very, very shy to emerge. I didn't know her gender. I didn't know her name. And it took 6 months for her to sort of go click. But Gillespia was always there. One of the things was fascinating that you can measure the sky with your hands. So if you extend your fist at arm's length, like that, and from knuckle to knuckle, that's basically 10 degrees. So from knuckle to knuckle, it's basically about 10 degrees in the sky. And you can fit 18 fists if your horizons are level into the sky. Go right there. So you could actually put 36 fists into the entire elliptic. And I have often wondered if this is where we got 360 degrees in our circle. I don't know. There's no proof. It's so ancient. But anyway, both Sass and Gillespia have studied mnemonics. So they know how to memorize things very quickly and very sharply. And she has begun to memorize the skies. But she has this great dream of going south to see constellations and the skies that she's never seen before. And she's part of the Guild of Astronomers and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, no, she becomes incredibly pivotal. Yeah.
Wow, I love that. Look, I've learned about the hands now and the lines, and now I've learned about knuckle to knuckle. And I'm going to go out in the night sky tonight. I'm going to measure from the Little Dipper to the Big Dipper and see what I come up with.
Yeah. But go from sunrise, see where the sun rises, and then see where it sets. And you have measured half of the elliptic.
That's fantastic.
Which is the zodiac band. So I just thought, here's a culture that is limited by the fact that it's not very technologically advanced, but it is sophisticated in its observations nonetheless.
That's amazing. So I have a question for you, Peter.
Yeah.
If one of those two characters could come to life, which one would you want to have coffee with or tea?
I think all three of them, of course. We can have a coffee for four. Why not?
Yeah.
And we can invite Sean as well, who is the council strategist. But he's facing quite a few challenges. Just say, is this going to work? And so in the end, he rides a bit roughshod over people's sensitivities, all this sort of stuff, because this is more important. And is something being more important, riding roughshod over people's loves and fears and expectations? Is that nonviolent? Is that pacifist? And it's a question that doesn't get answered until book 3. So just Sass, Lalia, Gillespia, and us, right?
That would be a very interesting conversation, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't last for just a half an hour. That would be hours long conversation.
Oh, yeah. Because they don't know what's going to happen until you get to book 2 and very much book 3.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So let's take a minute now and think about the intersection of education, psychology, and storytelling. So you've studied memory techniques going all the way back to Socrates. How do these ancient methods appear in your writing, and how can readers apply them in their own lives?
Okay. Because writing was sort of not as strong as it is now, or reading for that matter, they had oral traditions that were basically falling out of fashion during Socrates' time. And Socrates had advice to people because his memory was astonishing, as much as a lot about him. And he basically advised people: do not write anything down. The moment you write something down, it weakens the memory. I mean, we can't do that these days. But I did study it, and I was very interested in doing research in speed memory, speed math, and speed reading techniques to combine them into a single learning unit. Fascinating stuff. When they're applied, they work. It's actually pretty simple, pretty straightforward, but you have to practice. It's like a muscle. It's like going to a mental gym every day. Start small. Stephen can't memorize a list of 10 items, but in the end, if you create structures by which you facilitate the memory, remembering, then there's a trick I used to be able to do pretty quickly. You would write down a list of 30 items. You would show it to me. I would have it memorized backwards and forwards within under 5 minutes. And you can ask me what.
That's fascinating. That's
yeah,
fascinating.
But once you get the systems in place and begin to practice them, there are competitions where people memorize decks of cards, the order of the cards, and they get them right. So that's 52 cards in a random order, and they can just the two of jacks, the queen of hearts, the seven of clubs, the six of spades, and so forth. That's pretty useless. But when you're trying to memorize important concepts in a book, whatever, then you have to create memory techniques.
That is so cool. And you know what, Peter? I actually use the body list. I think it was Kevin Trudeau, maybe. So when I'm going to go shopping at the store, I imagine what I need on, like different parts of my body. So like milk up here, I've got bread over here, oranges over here, something down here, and on my knees down to my toes, right? So I'll be in the store going, what's on the head? What's on the shoulder? What's on the stomach? What's on the knees?
Excellent. And then if you have images for, say, the numbers 1 to 30, you can link something to those images. Okay, what is number 1? What's 2? What's 3? What's 4? What's 5? Etc. And that's how you can memorize a list of 30 and plus more items. So yeah. Yes, but what you're doing with the body is similar to what they used to call a memory palace. So you would imagine a home or a house or a castle, a palace, and you would walk through it and just say, on my left is this. And so that's why we still have the expression of, in the first place is your first image that basically you are connecting the thought or the image or the point you want to make.
Wow, that's cool. I do use the house list, like, what's on the chair, what's on the coffee table, what's over here, and I do use that one. Yeah.
Excellent.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So, Peter, you were talking about speed reading, but would you say it can rob books of their emotional depth? How does that perspective connect with the novel's idea that knowledge, like magic, must be absorbed slowly and thoughtfully?
Slowly and thoughtfully is the way to go. I did study it. It was quite useful during post-secondary education. But you're quite right. If you why bother reading War and Peace, speed reading, and it's happened, and yet it's like going to a buffet and just going and just, okay, I'm just eating a full meal, and you didn't savor the nuances of taste, smell, all that sort of stuff. And the combination thereof, I'll have a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Oh my goodness. So speed reading is useful, but it does rob you of the enjoyment of reading. Or it did for me anyway.
I do agree. Yeah. If you need to just get some informational text down, then that's okay. But when it's a novel, it has the 5 senses, you want to definitely be able to be there in the novel with the characters.
But even in nonfiction, if the writing is good, just wow, what a wonderfully turned phrase. And if you're speed reading, information is also exhausting. And I ended up with reading fatigue, and I dropped it. I dropped it after, I guess, about 9 months, because it's excuse me, it is an interesting technique to learn. but and useful in a very pragmatic, hard fashion. But yeah, but when you think of how much care, one hopes, that went into the writing, why you dismissing it by just trying to extract the knowledge that you think that you need, when the whole thing might be, there might be larger ideas there. And sometimes reading too quickly will cause that to happen. You get the facts, but you don't get the point.
Yeah, absolutely. Leave out all those extra adjectives that really help bring it home.
Yeah.
But now just to switch gears a little bit, I'm curious because one of your bookstore stories involves selling the satanic verses in brown paper bags.
Oh my
what
goodness.
What did that moment teach you about fear and power that books can hold?
Yeah. I used to work in the bookstore in Montreal, and when Salman Rushdi's book, The Satanic Verses, came out, and the fatwa, but he was slapped on the head with a fatwa, he killed his author. This book is banned. We were the first bookstore in North America to carry it. Because the owner of the bookstore had connections in England. So he was able to ship a whole bunch over to Canada. So the Iranian community in Montreal is fairly quiet. And the appointments were set up for specific purchases and customers. So that at 12:15 we're having a person coming, and we were not allowed to sell them, but the manager was the person in charge, so it was entirely hush-hush, entirely secretive. But I recognized some of these people. Oh my, they're regular. Oh, okay. Brown paper bags. It was usually, I think it was cash only, so nothing could be discovered through a credit card, that sort of stuff. So the Iranian community, even though it has escaped to a very safe country, they were worried. I mean, you're in a completely safe country, but they just wanted to have that caution that we're reading a banned book in a country that has no such laws against reading what you want. It was a very interesting conundrum that here they are, they're in a free country, the liberty is everywhere. Freedom to do and read what you want, and yet they carried that fear with them. The interesting thing was afterwards, I talked to them quietly, individually. So how was the Satanic Verses? So there were three types of responses. Just some said, I couldn't get past the first 20 pages. I couldn't understand it. The second one was, yeah, I read it. It's okay. I don't know what the fuss is all about. And the third one was more like, yeah, I can see why they're upset, but it's not worth the fatwa. It's not worth the banning of a book like that.
Wow. It's such controversial subjects like that. I could see why they were putting them in brown paper bags just to protect people, but still, it's a little suspicious when you're walking out with a brown paper bag and nobody else says, what's in the bag?
Well, it might be a bottle of whiskey.
Yeah, that's true.
and if you're Muslim, that's forbidden. But actually, the story of the Satanic Verses is more about the diaspora in England trying to keep their lives intact.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have to think about this one for a while.
Okay.
But let's talk about inspiration. So you mentioned Asimov's quote, "Violence is the last refuge of the incompetent." How does that belief resonate through the City of Magicians?
Well, it's strong. When I first read that, like decades ago, Asimov's Foundation trilogy, I'm very interested in the long evolutionary development of cultures and peoples and languages and everything else. And this is what the Foundation trilogy, and it's not just a trilogy, there are other books associated with it as well. Asimov has lovely, pithy sayings and violence. It goes back to the pacifist point of view. If you want to be incompetent, violence will be the thing that sets you as an observable icon of, okay, if he's violent, he's not going to do things properly. So that's why the City of Magicians is trying to keep their nonviolent approach to things, and this is why they're trying to not mold but convince the barbarian invader that there are better ways of doing things.
Wow, I love it. And there's a line from Dune that never makes it into the movies. We chanting,
oh yes,
we who carry the name of concubine, history will call us wives. Why do you
Yes.
find that line so powerful, and how does that echo through your storytelling?
Well, because Dune, there's a lot of violence in Dune, and the political strategizing that's happening. The Bene Gesserit, which is this powerful women's secret order that's manipulated in genetic lines and all this sort of stuff. And Jessica, who is the mother of Paul, she never marries her duke. And but she knows that he won't. But he has to maintain his marriageless state to convince other great houses that he's still accessible. She may be the mistress on the side, but so in the end, Jessica has this wonderful last line where Chani is about to say, he has to marry Princess Irulan. I will upset myself. The love of my life is gone. And Jessica says, wait, do you not know my son? And this is where she comes up with this wonderful line that was powerful, and it's a lovely. It indicates that yes, he has to make this marriage of political convenience and necessity, and yet Sandy is part of his life for life, and the fact that she misses this, she does not know Paul, and yet in the movie she runs away in a sulk, just like my goodness. So the movie robbed Chani of her own nobility and the lack of understanding, and Jessica's reminding her of, do you not know my son?
Wow. Yeah, that is powerful.
Yeah. And the movie was, I was crestfallen when that was the ending for the first movie.
Oh.
So, yeah. Anyway,
I know. Dang it.
The director's choice. Okay.
Exactly. So, Peter, let's talk about some tips for writers, because you're a very accomplished author, and I have a lot of subscribers who are authors or aspiring writers, and readers, of course, lots of readers. So what's one piece of advice you'd give to aspiring writers, especially those who are beginning a long journey of authorship?
Okay. One of the things that worked for me was to write every day, and start small, and just make it a gentle habit to begin with. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to your writing. Throw nothing out. So I had, when I was writing City of Magicians, if I saw this section, oh my goodness, this is crap. So I would cut and paste it into a separate file that I called fragments. So that just in case, but there's a lovely phrase that I'm now missing. And so I would always be able to go back. I learned that really early on because I would delete and just say, okay, but what was I saying? That was a nice turn of phrase that I liked. It was good and usable. And so, but I don't have it. So write every day, throw nothing out. But the other thing to do as well is read. The more you read, the more it expands your vocabulary. So one of the things, if you have writer's block, I didn't really have writer's block with City, because if something was stuck, I could always go on to something else that wasn't. There was one. Sometimes there was one section where this person goes on and on about his particular struggle, and it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And to say, well, all of these are nice phrases, and oh my God, this is getting too unwieldy. And then I let it sit there. Be patient with yourself. Be kind to yourself. And at one point, I was going to go back, and boom, 5 pages of, we can call it drivel now, just compacted itself to 2 paragraphs that were short, sweet, and perfect. So the writing, if you allow it, the writing will tell you. The characters will tell you.
Do you have a personal go-to solution for writer's block when it hits? Just keep writing?
Yep. Nope. If it depends on your block, if you've got a lot of material and if something's not working, just put it to one side gently and work on something else. But the other thing to do is to stop. If it is a major thing that just freezes everything else, then stop. walk away from it and read something outside of your own genre.
Outside of your own genre, that's key.
Yep. Which is sometimes why those books are good. I read nonfiction or campaign descriptions of the invasion into Napoleon's invasion into Russia. So it's quite different. And so it jogs the memory. Sometimes also wordplay. I also read poetry. And I'm subscribed to this magazine that's been out for almost a century now, called Poetry. And so every month I get this little booklet of various poets from around the world, mostly in English. But if it's in another language, you have the language on one side, English on the other. So just give yourself a break, but don't abandon the writing or the reading.
Very good. So, Peter, what do you hope readers will take away from after finishing the trilogy of the City of Magicians?
I think you'll be interested to see what happens in books 4, 5, and 6. But also to realize that magic is at your fingertips. Magic is the medium through which we live. We call it magic because we don't understand the premises or its dynamic or the things that make it work. But if we become more alert, as Sass begins to realize, oh my goodness, there's something larger going on here at the end of book 3. And I said, what is it? What am I sensing? And so he opens himself up to just say, maybe this is what we've been walking towards through books 1, 2, and 3. But the consequences are
4, 5, and 6.
Yeah, right. Yeah, the consequences are possibly quite dire, but 4, 5, and 6 will tell you more.
Oh, fascinating. It looks like I have a lot of reading ahead of me. This is good news.
Okay, well, that's good.
So, one thing that's kind of on a personal note for me, because I love this topic too as well, is how does gardening inspire your writing life?
Oh, that's another thing. If things are blocked, or I've written actually during the writing of books 1, 2, and 3, which was, as I say, just a single book, I had a very good habit of writing 5 to 8 hours a day, every day. And that took me through a 13-year period. And then editing it took an additional 5. And every once in a while, a nice good break that had nothing to do with literature, nothing to do with writing, was going out in the garden, reading, digging things up, raising bees. I used to keep bees. I had 3 beehives in the backyard as well, which were fascinating, lovely little guys, lovely little critters. Unfortunately, the bees are all gone. I suffered complete colony collapse, which is what's happening all around the world. So advice to people who want to get into beekeeping: start with absolutely pristine hives. Do not get secondhand hives. You don't know where they've been. So,
wow, that's really good, because I was actually checking into beekeeping at one point, and there is a lot to know for those little guys. We want to keep them healthy. And
yeah. So the thing to do as well is plant a pollinator garden. I used to have vegetables. Don't do vegetables anymore. I can go down to the grocery and buy them. So I grow mostly flowers that bloom from a very, very early. Actually, I even let my dandelions bloom. Up here in Vancouver, I let dandelions bloom in January because they're one of the first flowers that are out. And make sure you have flowers blooming through the entire season up until October if you can.
Right. I know people get so angry with having dandelions in their lawn. I'm like, don't do that. This is bees' first food in the springtime, you know?
Yep. But once other things are blooming, then I start realizing, oh my goodness, far too many dandelions. So I start digging them up. But the interesting thing about not having honeybees anymore is that I now get all these interesting, different local bees. And some of them aren't even in the reference books. I have several reference books on bumblebees. My goodness, there are so many different types of bumblebees. But the other thing about the native bees, almost all bumblebees are ground dwellers. So do not dig your soil, because if you do, you're destroying their habitats. You may be digging up the burrows that they make. So so those big honking bumblebees that you see first thing in the spring, these are the fertile queens. They mate it in October, and they've been gone into hibernation for the winter, and they emerge in March and April on warm days, and they buzz around. Their flying habits are quite different from the normal pollinating sort of stuff, and they're close to the ground, and they're looking for holes in the ground that they can start burrowing. So what I do, usually late fall, maybe January, February, I take a broom handle and stick it into the ground. Well, maybe from that far in, that sort of stuff, and maybe even further if the soil permits. And when the queen finds that hole, her flying just goes, oh my goodness, a condo, it's empty, it's mine. It's fascinating.
They can see sign.
Yeah, exactly. So going out into the garden, it's a nice break from all the literary stuff. It really is.
I completely agree. I should be calling you Professor Peter right now, because Professor Gribble, because I have learned so much, and I am just so excited. So is there any last thoughts or words of wisdom you want to leave our listeners with today before we wrap this up?
If you want to find the books, they're available on Amazon. If you happen to be in Vancouver, they're also available at the Chapters Indigo store on Robson, all three of them. And I'm beginning to, I just came back in April from the LA Times Festival of Books, at the Book Fest. And I'm possibly going to be there next April with all three books on the campus at UCLA. We'll see.
Fantastic. Wow, that is amazing.
And the other thing, if you want to learn more, the website is petergribble.com. And I'm slowly getting used to being on Instagram, very slowly.
It's painful, isn't it? Yeah, I completely agree. And I'll make sure that I put all that down in the description box below so that readers and listeners can come find you and all your wonderful books. So that brings us to the end of another unforgettable episode of Gimme 5. A huge thank you to Peter Gribble for joining us today and sharing the insight, inspiration, and layered thought behind the City of Magicians. From telepathic sendings to the power of knowledge and the quiet strength of pacifism, Peter's world reminds us that even the smallest piece, like a pawn, can change the entire game. If you've enjoyed today's conversation, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell notification so that you never miss an episode. And if you're intrigued, as I am, grab your copy of Threat, the first book of the City of Magicians series, and you'll want to read all three of them where their strategies are colliding. Got a favorite moment from the interview? Drop it in the comments below. We'd love to hear what resonated with you. Until next time, keep reading, keep wondering, and remember, sometimes the most powerful journeys don't require leaving your seat. See you in the next chapter. Thank you, Peter.
My pleasure. Gimme 5.
Goodbye. Today, I am thrilled to host a guest who blends.
Have some more coffee.
Are you there?
Yes, I'm there. You have frozen.
All I see is a dark screen.
Okay.
Just another blooper.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Yep. I'm just getting. I don't know what to do here. I'm a little lost. I can see my own camera here, so I don't know what to push. Start.
Great. Get ready for our magical questions that open. Well, you know what? I'm gonna stop that. Sorry.
Okay.
Blooper.